public embraces it. The book is another success. It is during this rekindling of interest in the topic that the man behind it is finally unmasked. It happens by a remarkable coincidence. Robert Gorman and Carlos Allende share the same hometown, New Kensington, Pennsylvania. In 1979, Gorman is talking to a neighbor, a man named Allen, who suddenly reveals that he's the father of Carl Allen, alias Carlos Miguel Allende, and he has the documents to prove it.
He says, "Carl sends us stuff all the time. Let me go get you some of his papers." He disappears and comes out in just a few moments with a rather sizable box, heavy box, two-handed box, and says, "Here, anything at all here you can use. Help yourself." I look down. I'm very skeptical. I don't know why, but I'm very skeptical. And I open it up, and there's a batch of seamanship's papers. And I look in the one corner, and I see those beloved numbers, 7416175, the same number that he had given in a postscript to a letter to Jessup. And I know that I've got the real deal, that this is not an imposter. This was an amazing moment. I knew that I had the real deal. Carlos Miguel Allende.
The real deal turns out to be quite different from the legendary Senor Allende. His real name is Carl Meredith Allen, born in this house in Springdale, Pennsylvania in 1925.
Mostly what comes to mind about Carl Allen, my older brother, was the fact that he was very intelligent but not really smart, if you know what I mean. When they had their IQ tests, that he had the second highest IQ in the county. And that same year, he failed 9th grade.
Though a poor student, he is a voracious reader, with a quirky habit of annotating almost everything he reads.
He'd scratch out what the person had written in a book, and then he would put his own little anecdote in the margin. And I think it was basically because he didn't learn how to write. So he dealt more with just chopping up what the other person had to say.
He'd buy a book, he would fill it up with comments, and then pop it into the mail to somebody he thought would be interested in what he wrote.
That he annotates the case for the UFO and sends it to Navy headquarters is typical of Allen. But this is one shot in the dark that finds a target, setting off a remarkable chain reaction.
The Navy just happened to call Jessup. Jessup happened to have the letters. The two men, off-duty or not, decided to reproduce the book, which generated rumors that this annotated book was being circulated among the top of the top. And then, of course, Jessup commits suicide.
Robert Gorman concludes that the Philadelphia experiment is nothing more than a phantom. In 1980, he publishes an article in Fate magazine called Alias Carlos Allende, in which he reveals the man is an Allen, not an alien. But he finds that legends die hard.
I was sending out queries to different prominent UFO personalities, people that ran magazines, and what I was getting back in return was more than just a runaround. What I was getting back in return was almost being blacklisted. That it was fine when I was writing pro-UFO articles and articles about the men in black and the mysteries of the universe, but they did not want to hear about Carlos Allende.
Allende himself responds with death threats.
And he even, on the back of an envelope that he sent to his father, mentioned the only reason he hasn't shot Gorman is he hasn't gotten to him yet.
In fact, the two do finally come face to face. But Allen in person is anything but intimidating.
It was probably the most anticlimactic moment of my life was meeting Carlos Allende in the flesh. Because he couldn't work any magic on me. I wasn't involved and wasn't intrigued about the disappearing destroyer. Wasn't intrigued that he might be an alien, because I knew the truth.
Is the debunking of Allen as an eyewitness the end of the Philadelphia experiment? Or did something really happen back in 1943? When we return, what the Navy says and how it could have inspired the tale of the disappearing ship.
It appeared to us that it was just barroom talk, and these boys were talking about having the ship made invisible.
The movie The Philadelphia Experiment was a flop when it was initially released in 1984, but later became a cult hit and even inspired a sequel in 1993. History's Mysteries will be back on the History Channel.
Summer 1996. 53 years after allegedly being involved in an invisibility experiment, the USS Eldridge disappears again. Since 1955, the warship has been serving in the Greek Navy under a new name, the Leon. But Greek officials don't know where she is. They are embarrassed to tell a writer from Playboy magazine that they have lost track of the 1,200-ton ship. The Eldridge, a.k.a. Leon, soon turns up in a salvage yard in Crete. Her most recent disappearance is due to a bureaucratic error, not a top-secret experiment. Her final appearance is in Playboy magazine before she is taken apart with blowtorches and sold for scrap. But what truth is there to the rumors of a top-secret experiment during World War II?
Way back when, did they have the technology to make something optically invisible? Did they find a way to teleport an object from one place to another instantaneously?
During the early 40s, there are invisibility techniques of a sort in practice. They range from simple smokescreens to an ingenious plan to camouflage airplanes codenamed Yehudi.
Project Yehudi. They equipped 2 aircraft with seal-beamed headlights, more or less, along the wings to brighten the silhouette of the plane in the open sky, and it was relatively successful.
The Navy considers all options to hide their ships from prowling submarines, even the parlor trick of a magician named Joseph Dunninger.
Mr. Dunninger, as a way to get publicity, mentioned he could make warships invisible. And then when he had when he called the press conference to do this, he said, well, they didn't have a warship, and of course, in the hotel room, so he would make a photograph disappear. And he did. He made the photograph of the warship disappear. Well, the military got wind of this and approached him, and he was forced to say that, no, he did not really have a way to make warships invisible. But he did mention there were a couple of techniques he had in the back of his mind that might make them a little harder to see. And whatever he told them was kept secret, and Dunninger took it to his grave.
There is another Navy practice that feeds the rumor mill, a technique to hide ships from magnetic mines called degaussing.
Degaussing is a method of running wires along the hull of a ship to make the ship invisible, quote, to magnetic mines.
We always knew degaussing was going to take place because they'd collect all the watches and clocks. Anything that kept time on a ship was taken off and put ashore, so the magnetic field wouldn't disturb your watch.
During World War II, the Navy operates a little-known testing area in Chesapeake Bay. A warship fitted with demagnetizing gear would have paid a visit.
And when a ship was equipped with the degaussing gear, it was run through this range to see whether it was making contact with any of the pickups or not. And when it went through and did not leave a signature, they considered that the degaussing gear was working properly and the ship was released.
It is the Navy's position that the original source of the legend of a disappearing ship is an exaggeration of the degaussing practice.
It appeared to us that it was just barroom talk, and these boys were talking about having the ship made invisible. And the invisibility that we were talking about was the magnetic invisibility for the degaussing.
As for the rumor